Hi guys, welcome back to the Mina Does Art Stuff YouTube channel. My name is Mina and on this channel we do art stuff. So welcome back. This is going to be kind of like part 2 of my Schmincke dot card swatching series. Part 1 was when I swatched out the full 140 dot card of their regular colours, and today we're going to be swatching out the 40 dot card of the Supergranulation colours. This only has 8 out of the 10 sets that are currently released. It's missing the Haze and the Urban set. I actually have the Urban set separately, so I've dotted those out on some watercolour paper to swatch out as well. I don't have the Haze set, so that's the only one I won't be swatching today. Otherwise, we're going to be swatching all of these together. I've written down the pigment numbers on the paper, so as I'm swatching, I can read out the pigment numbers and we can talk about that as well. The paper for this stock card is a bit thicker than the last one, so I didn't bother going ahead creating a new swatch sheet for it just because it would take so long to do. But I'm going to go through, and then at the end we'll talk about I'll talk about some of my favourite colours and which ones I think might be worth purchasing as like individual colours, maybe depending obviously on your own situation, but I will talk about the ones that I particularly enjoy. There will be links down below to Jackson's art where you can purchase some of these, these paints, and I believe the Haze set of colours is exclusive to Jackson's, so that might be why it's not on the dot card. I don't know. But actually at the moment, whilst I am filming this week Jackson's is having their watercolour sale, so a lot of their watercolour brands are on sale at the moment, so now would be a great time to go ahead and purchase these if that is something, or purchase some of these paints if that is something you are interested in, because you can get them at a discount. Also, if it's your first time ordering with Jackson's and you use my link, then you get an extra 10% off as well. And it's also a great way to support the channel as they are affiliate links, so it doesn't cost you anything extra, but it helps. I earn a small commission from anyone who orders using my link, and I always greatly appreciate it when people do. Okay, so I'm going to go through and start swatching these out. What I'm actually going to do is, because some of these colours can be a little bit harder to re-wet, I'm going to go ahead and put a little dot of water on all of them just to give them a second to reactivate a little bit before we get started swatching. And yeah, and so I'm going to do what I did last time, and there'll be 2 videos. There'll be one that's in real time with me chatting and talking through the whole process and each colour, etc., and my thoughts at the end. And there'll be a second video which is literally just the swatching, slightly sped up, not by much, slightly sped up, set to music. So if you just want to watch colours being swatched out and you don't want to hear the talking or the chat or anything like that, you can watch that version instead. So you get 2 options for this one. And yeah, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and dab on some water and I'll be right back. Okay, let's get to it. We're going to start with the Volcano set at the top here. So first up we have Volcano Yellow, which has pigment code PY159. It's not very common to find a granulating single pigment yellow, or just a granulating yellow in general. It's a very, this one's quite a hard to re-wet colour. I do have a tube of this because I do think it's quite a unique colour to have. The only other PY159 pigment I've seen is, I believe Winsor & Newton have their Lemon Yellow Deep is this pigment, but it's not a granulating, it's not as granulating as the Schmincke one. Then we have Volcano Orange, which is made up of PY159, which is the aforementioned Volcano Yellow, and PR108, which is a cadmium red pigment, which is going to be coming up next. So that's the red and the yellow mixed together, and this is a nice granulating orangey red colour. Again, because the yellow is quite low tinting, it's not the strongest orange, but it's quite nice. And then we've got the Volcano Red, which is PR108, so that's a cadmium red pigment. And cadmium red is typically a granulating colour. However, most brands have a more finely milled version of cadmium pigments that don't seem to granulate as much as this one does. So this is a really nice granulating red, and I do have a tube of this one as well. If If I remember, I will let you know the ones I have tubes of myself. But I do think these are fairly unique colours. You can actually mix this red with other cadmium reds that you might have to get a more, like a stronger red colour that granulates, or with any other sort of red colour that you might want to have as a more granulating version. Then we have Volcano Violet, which has PV62. PV62 is Schmincke's version of Cobalt Violet hue. I've not seen another brand use that particular pigment other than Lucas Watercolours. They also have a PV62 Cobalt Violet colour, but I've not tried it out. As well as PR108, so again that Volcano Red. And this one, like just painting it out, I can already see the two pigments separating on the paper. So that would be a really nice sort of colour separating mix there. Then we have Volcano Brown, PR108, so again that cadmium red pigment with PBK11, which is a Mars black, so it's a granulating black pigment. And that's sort of just okay in my opinion. I'm not that fussed about that one, to be honest. But I'm not sure how well you can see, but this one looks really beautiful right now. So the two that I have from this set are the yellow and red. I can already mix the orange based off of those two. I have a PBK11, so I can easily mix that one as well myself. The only one I wouldn't be able to mix exactly would be the Volcano Violet. But as pretty as I think that is, it's not really a colour I would be using all too much, so I don't really feel like I'm missing out by not having it, to be quite honest. And I could probably get something fairly similar by mixing another sort of violet pigment or even certain blues or whatever to the PR108 to get something similar. Okay, next up we have the Galaxy collection. This is one of the original sets that came out. So first we have Galaxy Pink. That's PV16, which if I'm remembering correctly is a manganese violet, and PBR33, which is mahogany brown in Schmincke's line. It's a really lovely granulating brown, and this one I do have a tube of, and it's really beautiful. I think of it as like a more saturated, more muted, like more saturated I guess version of a Potter's Pink. Like it has that same sort of Potter's Pink vibe to it. Slightly more pigmented depending on which version of Potter's Pink you have. Then next up we have Galaxy Violet, that's PB29 and PR233. So I don't feel like this is the most necessary paint to purchase, because I think most people have a PB29, and I think a lot of artists have Potter's Pink as well. Maybe not everyone does, but it's not an uncommon pigment for people to have. So it's one that you could easily mix if you had those two pigments. Otherwise, if it's something you really like and think you would use a lot of, it wouldn't be the worst one to purchase. I can already see that Potter's Pink sort of settling out in the swatch there as well, which is interesting. Next up we have Galaxy Blue. This for me is a completely redundant convenience mix. It's made up of PB29 and PG50. Both are pigments I typically have on my palette. So that would be a ultramarine blue, PB29, and then a cobalt teal, PG50. Or cobalt turquoise light, or cobalt turquoise sometimes, depending on the brand. But again, those are two pigments I typically have on my palette all the time. So it's not really a colour that I feel like I would need to purchase. Also this is very similar to like a cobalt cerulean or a cerulean blue chromium. Okay, sorry about that. My daughter just came to say goodnight. Next up we have Galaxy Brown. This is PBR6, PV62. So yeah, that's it. PBR6 and PV62. So it's that cobalt violet hue. And PBR6 is a Mars brown, so it's not a bad colour. It's just, there again, not one I would find particularly necessary for me, my painting, the things that I paint. Then we have Galaxy Black, PB29 and PBK11. Again, not a convenience mix I'm particularly feel like I need to purchase. Like I could easily mix this because I have ultramarine and I have Mars Black. But it's a nice sort of cool leaning black if that is something you would like, and obviously, of course, it will granulate. So that's the Galaxy colours. I think for me the nicest one is the Galaxy Pink, in my opinion. Yeah, I think that's the nicest one. And that's the one that I've got, and I don't really see a need for purchasing any of the others personally. Galaxy Violet is quite nice as well. That is a nice one, but not one I feel like I need. Then for the Deep Sea colours, we've got, starting with Deep Sea Violet, it's PB29 and PBR33. This is a nice dark, that's a nice dark mix. So this is that ultramarine blue and mahogany brown. It's definitely a beautiful mixture. That is a nice one. I do like this one. I do think that's nice. Then we have Deep Sea Indigo, which does not look like an indigo to me. It's PG18, which is a Viridian, and PV62, which is that cobalt violet hue. This seems more like a muted sort of turquoise colour. That's how I see it. It's more of a muted turquoise. Then we have Deep Sea Blue, PB29, PV16 and PG50. So it's essentially the same as the Galaxy Blue, but with a manganese violet added in. So it's ultramarine blue, manganese violet, and a cobalt teal, cobalt turquoise, PG50. Then we have Deep Sea Green, which is PB29 and PG18. So that's ultramarine blue again, and a Viridian. That is quite a pretty colour, but again, it's not really one that I feel like I need. I have a lot of other paints, more or less expensive paints, that are a very similar hue to this one, and or it's something that you could easily mix. It reads a lot like a turquoise, like a PB15 and PG7 mixture, but this is just a granulating version of that. So if you have a PB29, you could probably mix a bit of a phthalo green to get something similar, or if you had a Viridian, you could mix your own. Then we have Deep Sea Black, which is PBK11, so that Mars Black, PB74, which is a cobalt blue deep, and PG35, which is a cerulean blue, I believe. Again, it's just not particularly exciting as far as blacks go. Right, next up we have the Shire colours. I'll just move this up a little bit. There we go, so you can see. First up we have Shire Yellow, so that's PY159 and PV62. So this is that same Volcano yellow pigment and the cobalt violet hue. It's quite a muddy sort of yellow, which is to be expected because you're mixing a yellow and a violet pigment, and those are complementary colours, so it definitely mutes that one down. But it's not my favourite, I will be honest. Then we have Shire Olive, which is PB35, that's a cerulean blue, and PY159. That's a fairly, I can tell this is a very low tinting strength green sort of pigment. Again, it's not bad, but not my favourite. And we have Shire Green. It's a very sort of spring green colour. This is PG18 and PY159. It's that yellow with a Viridian. Again, because that yellow is quite a low tinting strength colour, all these PY159 mixes aren't super strong mixes. Then we have Shire Blue, which is PB29, PG26 and PY159. So you've got an ultramarine, PG26 is a cobalt green, and that PY159, which is the yellow. This is a nice one. I do like this one. That's a nice green. I think that's an interesting one. And it's not as low tinting as the other colours. I don't mind low tinting colours, I don't. I'm just not a huge fan of those particular hues. Then lastly we have Shire Grey. It's PBK11, PB74 and PY159. So very similar to the one above in the composition. You've got that Mars black, you've got the cobalt blue deep, and this time we have a yellow mixed in instead of another blue. I mean, that's not the worst one of all the neutrals, but we'll see when we get to the end. Okay, so that's that first page, first side done. Then moving on to the desert colours. Starting with Desert Yellow. This is PBR7, so I'm guessing something like a raw sienna type, or yellow oak, no, not yellow oak, raw sienna, and PY159. There's lots of different PBR7 pigments, but I imagine because this is going for the yellow option, we're going to go for something like a raw sienna, rather than like a burnt sienna or an umber. Then next up we have Desert Orange. Again, that's quite a muddy yellow, but very similar in hue to the Shire Yellow, to be honest. Then we have Desert Orange, PY159 and PBR33. Sorry if you can hear that horn, it's a train going by. Yeah, that's quite a nice one. That's quite a nice earthy sort of orange colour. That's not bad, I do quite like that one. And then we have Desert Brown. That's PB29, PBR33, so that's an ultramarine and the mahogany brown. I don't know if I said for the Desert Orange it's PY159 and PBR33, so mahogany brown and the Volcano yellow pigment. Then we have Desert Green. This is quite an interesting one. It's PR108, so the cadmium red from Volcano red, and PG26, which is cobalt green deep. And you can really see that separation already. It creates a really interesting color separation mix. I'm just, as interesting as it is, and I do think it's a very unique color, I'm not sure how I would use that in my work. I'm not sure it would get much use. So I don't think it's one I would add, but I do think it's really unique. And if you're looking for unique mixes, that's probably one of the more unique ones on this swatch chart so far. Not a huge fan of that Desert Brown. I don't think it's anything particularly exciting. And then finally we have Desert Grey, which is PBK11 and PY159, so Mars Brown and the Volcano Yellow. And this creates quite a sort of dull, muted sort of green. And one thing I have learned is that a black mixed with a yellow gives quite a green, like a very muted sort of green shade, which is interesting. So we'll see how that dries. Then next up we have Tundra Orange. This is PBR7, so again probably like a raw sienna or maybe even a burnt sienna. PY43, which is a yellow ochre or yellow iron oxide, and PR233, which is a potter's pink. So again you can see that pink separation coming through, which is really pretty. Again, hue wise it's very similar to Desert Orange. They're not different enough to warrant needing both, although that is, the Desert Orange is probably a little bit more orange, whereas the Tundra Orange is a bit more brown leaning. So I guess depending on which you think you would need the most in your work, I'd say pick the one that's the most useful for you. You don't need both. Then next up we have Tundra Pink, PB29 and PR233. This is one that I do really like the look of, but because I have both pigments, PB29 and PR233, I've not bought it because I feel like I could quite easily mix this myself. It's not, it's, I don't know how much I would actually use it to warrant needing a tube of it as a convenience colour in my collection. Then next up we have Tundra Violet. I do have a tube of this and I do think it's pretty unique. Even though the pigments aren't particularly unique, it's PB29 and PBR6, so it's ultramarine blue and Mars brown. But it's actually, it's such a beautiful dark. Such a beautiful dark. And it granulates beautifully. You get this beautiful sort of orangey brown granulation when it dries. It's just stunning. Let me see, do I have it here to show you? Because I do have this one on my palette at the moment and I'm really enjoying experimenting with it. If I can, yeah. So here, this one here is Tundra Violet. I did like a little swatchy swatch of Tundra Violet in different concentrations, and it's just really unique and interesting. It's almost like a indigo with some brown granulation to it. I love it. I think it's great. Yeah, I do really like that one. Anyway, that is definitely one of my favorites from the collection that I've discovered. I'm just trying to mop some of that extra water up so you can see the colours a bit better. I do think it's very similar though to Deep Sea Violet. I don't think you need both. I think they're very similar. Again, we'll look at it all at the end once they've all dried, but there again I feel like hue wise they're not different enough to warrant both. Then we have Tundra Blue, PBR7 and PB29. So again, like a raw sienna or a burnt sienna type colour with an ultramarine blue. Beautiful colour, but not a convenience mix I feel really warrants the added cost for these tubes, because these super granulation colours are not cheap. But some of them I feel like are really unique and definitely worth it. Then we have Tundra Green, which is PG19 and PBR6. This is one I have. I love this sort of mucky, dirty green sort of colour, and it's a very nice sort of olive green in my opinion. I actually think I also have a tube of the Tundra Orange. I think I have a small tube of it. I got a set of just 3 of the Tundra colours in the small 5ml tubes a while ago, and I think it came with Tundra Orange, Tundra Violet and Tundra Green. And yeah, these two are definitely my new favourites, or some of my new favourites from the colours that I have. These two are both on my palette at the moment. Then we have Glacier Blue. I have one of the Glacier colours, or 2. I have 2 of them actually. We'll come to that in a minute. So Glacier Blue is another completely redundant mix in my opinion. It's PB29 and PG50 again, which is exactly the same mix as Galaxy Blue, just in different concentrations. So I think the Glacier Blue has more ultramarine in it, and Galaxy Blue has more of the cobalt teal in it, because it's a lighter shade. So I don't know, those are colours, at least for me, because those are colours I always have on my palette. I just don't see the need for these convenience mixes. There again, that's me personally. Next up we have Glacier Turquoise, PV16, so Manganese Violet and PG50. This again is a really nice sort of muted turquoise colour. This one is pretty, and if you like this particular shade, there's a slightly muted version of a cobalt turquoise or cobalt teal. It might be worth it to you to purchase, but I don't know. It's a nice one. It's a nice to have, but I'm not sure I think it's worth the added cost. Maybe when if you like, it's on sale right now, so if you really like it, it would be a good time to grab it. Then we have Glacier Green, and I do have this one. It's not currently on my palette, but it's definitely a very interesting mix, and it was an early fan favourite with a lot of artists when these sets first released. So the Glacier set was one of the first 3. It was Glacier, Deep Sea and Galaxy were the original sets that were released by Schmincke, and it has a very interesting separation. So it's PG50 and PR233. So that's Cobalt Teal, Cobalt Turquoise and Potter's Pink. And then we have Glacier Brown, and this is also one that I have. Again, it's a really lovely, rich, deep, high tinting strength brown. This is PG26, which is a Cobalt Green Deep, and PBR6, so that Mars Brown. It's really interesting granulation. It's not currently on my palette, but I have had it in a palette. And it definitely works in place of any other sort of traditional brown that I would have. And I like how it's a strong tinting colour, because a little goes a long way. And then finally for the Glacier set we have Glacier Black, PBK11 and PB35. So that's Mars Black and a cerulean blue pigment. I don't know, I don't find the black ones or the greys particularly exciting in any of them, in any of these sets, to be honest. So yeah, my favourite two from the Glacier set would be the Glacier Green and Glacier Brown, which are the two that I have. And then next up we have Forest Blue. I do love this one. This is another one I currently have on my palette. PBK11 and PB36. So that's a cerulean blue chromium and Mars Black, or rather the other way around, Mars Black and cerulean blue chromium. This is beautiful, and again has beautiful granulation to it as well. Then we have Forest Brown, PBR7, PY43 and PG26. This is also one I have on my palette that I really enjoy. It's my favourite one from this set of the greens. PBR7, PY43, PG26. So burnt sienna, raw sienna type colour, PY43 yellow ochre, PG26 cobalt green deep. And then finally we have Forest Grey, PBR7, PBK11 and PG50. So that's that raw sienna type colour with Mars Black and Cobalt Teal, Cobalt Turquoise colour. Okay, I need to go change out the battery and then I'll be back to do the last 5 from the urban set, and then once everything's dried I'll come back and we'll chat about how it all looks. Okay, back now to swatch out the urban set. So first up we have Urban Yellow, which is PY159 and PV16. So that's that Volcano Yellow pigment along with Manganese Violet. Which I feel like we already had something similar to that. It looks very similar to one of the other yellows in the other swatch card. So we'll have a look at that after. And since I have space, I'm kind of swatching these out a little bit bigger. Although this one is a little bit hard to re-wet, but that's fine. Then we have Urban Red, which is a mix of 4 pigments. This is quite a big one. PY159, so Volcano Yellow. PR108, Volcano Red. That's cadmium red colour. PB35, so Cerulean Blue, and PBR6, Mars Brown. It's definitely an interesting, like, brownish red colour. Let's see how that one granulates. Then we have Urban Green, PY159, PB36 and PBK11, so that's Volcano Yellow, Cerulean Blue Chromium and Mars Black. This is a really nice green. I almost put this one on my palette this time, but I had a lot of greens, so I think on my next I might put this in my next palette. It'd be really interesting to have and see how this one will play with other colours. Then we have Urban Grey, PY159, PR108, PB35 and PBK11. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this one. I think I need to put this on my palette and play around with it a bit and see how it is. Like I said, the greys and the blacks didn't don't really excite me as much from the Supergranulation set, but because I purchased the Urban set as a set of 5 in the small tubes, it kind of just came with it. And I think as part of the set it works nicely, quite cohesively with the other colours. So yeah, I might include this in my next palette and see how it goes. And then finally we have Urban Brown. This was the only one that had a bit of separation with the binder when I was pouring it out, but nothing too crazy. This is PY159, PR108 and PPK11, so that is Volcano Yellow, Volcano Red and Mars Black. Okay. Now I'm just going to set everything aside for a few minutes to finish drying off, and then once it's all dry I'll come back and we'll look at everything closely. Okay, so back again now, and yeah, so the swatches are for the most part dry, so I thought I'd go ahead and show you them up close as well as I can. Let's see how we can do this. So obviously my lighting's not great because it is nighttime now. Let's see how I can do this. So there we go. Actually, you know what? Let's tilt this just a smidgen that way. So sorry about the shake. There we go. So here we go up close. So the Volcano colours, and the ones I've marked with an asterisk are the colours that I have. So we have Volcano Yellow, Volcano Orange, Red, Volcano Violet and Volcano Brown. That Volcano Brown does have some interesting granulation going on with that red coming through. But again, I mean, it is an interesting mix. It's just not one that I would particularly find useful. Then we have, and so my two recommendations would be the yellow and red, just because you can use it to mix a lot of the other colours as well. Then we have the Galaxy set, and so I have the Galaxy Pink. I actually do quite like the Galaxy Black. I think it's quite a nice sort of granulating indigo Payne's grey kind of colour. So that is one I will potentially consider adding to my wish list on Jackson's. But yeah, so those would be the two I would recommend from this set. Then for the Deep Sea, I don't have any of these colours, but looking at them now, looking at the swatches, the Deep Sea Violet and the Tundra Violet, if I can find a way to show you them both together. So that one and that one, they're very similar hues, and actually their pigment makeup is very similar as well. Both have PB29, which is the ultramarine. So this is, so you can see that Tundra Violet there, and that's the Deep Sea Violet. They are so similar. The brown pigments are the only thing that's different. So in Deep Sea, the brown pigment is PBR33, mahogany brown, and in Tundra Violet, it's PBR6, which is a Mars brown. So the only difference is that, otherwise they are very similar colours. So if you have one, you definitely do not need the other. I feel like they serve the same purpose. So that would be a recommendation from the Deep Sea set. But if you already have Tundra Violet, don't bother. You don't need both. They are basically the same colour. And I feel like the Supergranulation sets in general, there are a lot of very similar colours, very like marginally different or very not super noticeable differences, and so there's a lot of redundant colours. Like, you definitely don't need all of them by any stretch. So yeah, this is a recommendation unless you already have the Tundra Violet. Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily recommend any of these. I don't think any of them are particularly unique enough to make it, to warrant it. I mean, unless you look at any of these colours and you're like, yes, absolutely, I must have this colour exactly in this particular combination mix because it's perfect for something that I need it for, then by all means go ahead. I'm talking about, from my perspective, in my opinion, So take that for what you will. If you love any of these colours, by all means go ahead. I love these colours. I like the deep sea indigo and I like the deep sea green. I even like the deep sea blue. I'm thinking about it from the perspective of how much do these paints cost compared to how much will I be using them. And so in that sort of thinking process, as much as I love some of these colours, I don't see myself using them enough to warrant the price tag for the convenience mixture. Whereas, for example, here with the Deep Sea Indigo, I could buy just the PV62 pigment from Schmincke or use the Lucas one, which is cheaper, for much more paint. I already have a Viridian that I really like, and I could make my own mix. And with that PV62, I could make other mixes that I also like from the Supergranulation set with pigments I already have. So yes, you might not get the exact same hue, but you could get very close if you already have the individual pigments that make up these mixes, if that makes sense. These are very much convenience mixes. Pretty much all of them, other than the 2 single pigment colors. Everything else here is a convenience mixture. So yeah, take that for what you will. I love convenience mixes. I have a ton of them on my palette. I have nothing against convenience mixtures. What I do have an issue with is people thinking that they have to have all of these colors, and I feel like that's very unnecessary. Like, I love the Galaxy Violet, but I have both of those pigments, and so I don't see the point in purchasing that in a tube unless that was the exact hue, color combination, sort of like mix ratio that I wanted, and I use that sort of mix all the time. If it was a color I found myself mixing all the time when painting, then yes, buying the convenience mix would make sense, but I don't, so I don't feel like for me it's necessary. But for you, you might have a different opinion. Like, this Galaxy Blue is really beautiful, has really pretty granulation. I can easily mix that with the colors I already have on my palette. And have I? No, because I don't necessarily need it, but I can. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent there. So the one I would recommend from Deep Sea is the Deep Sea Violet. Maybe the Deep Sea Indigo as well, because I do think that's fairly unique, but there again, only if you feel like that's something you would really use. Otherwise, the rest I don't think are particularly unique or that great of a colour personally. I mean, that's an interesting sort of granulation, but I don't know. With the Shire colours, the first 3, they're okay. I don't like this yellow colour. It's very... I like a nice muddy mustard yellow or like green gold. I like those sort of murky yellowy colours. That one is just not it. Not for me anyway. If you like it, brilliant. But it's just not something I really like. I wouldn't use it. Same with the Shire Olive and Shire Green. I feel like they're a little bit too acidic green. I would be constantly mixing something else with them to modify them, so I don't see the point in buying the convenience mixture to begin with. However, that Shire Blue is absolutely gorgeous, and it is definitely going on my list, on my Jackson's wish list for sure. That one's beautiful. That and the Galaxy Black are going on my Jackson's wish list. Then we have the Desert Yellow, which again is that sort of murky, sort of slightly muddy yellow, although I prefer that one to the Shire Yellow. I don't know why, the hue of that one is preferable to me, although they are very similar. I don't want either of them, but if I had to choose, I would probably go for the Desert Yellow. The Desert Orange is really nice. It's a very sort of it's more orangey, I guess, compared to the Tundra Orange, which we'll come to. Desert Brown does absolutely nothing for me. Don't like it. It barely granulates. Nothing particularly special as far as I'm concerned. The Desert Green, however, that is a gorgeous colour. It is very unique. I just don't see myself using it enough to warrant purchasing a tube. But if you feel like you would use that, absolutely would 100% recommend that mixture. It's a unique mix. The PR 108, if you're not buying the Volcano Red on its own, is a unique one. PG26 is Cobalt Green Deep. That's not a pigment that I think a lot of artists keep on their palette. I know many do, but I don't think it's that common. And And then the Desert Grey, again, it's kind of like a really muted greenish colour. I'm a bit meh about that one, to be honest. So my recommendation from the Desert range would be the Desert Green for sure. And I think the Desert Orange is quite a nice mix if that's a colour you see yourself using a lot. From the Tundra set, Tundra Orange, Tundra Pink, Tundra Violet, Tundra Blue, Tundra Green. From these 5, I have these 3. The first, the middle, the last. I love all 3 of them. I think they are beautiful. I think the Tundra Orange, out of, if I had to drop one of them, I would drop off the Tundra Orange. But it's still a beautiful, granulating, sort of earthy orange colour. And I definitely prefer the earthier oranges over like really bright, clear oranges. And then the Tundra Pink I think is really beautiful, but again, I don't think the pigments are unique enough to warrant the higher price tag for the convenience mixture for myself personally. I do love that Tundra Violet, and once I run out of the small tube I will be purchasing a big one. And the Tundra Green is really beautiful as well. It's quite opaque, but it's just beautiful. I love it in the when it granulates, words. And then from the Glacier set, I think the Glacier Green is absolutely stunning. It's a really fun one to play with. It can be quite hard to get very sort of precise like glazing with it. If you do a lot of glazing, you'd probably struggle with that one, but it's beautiful to play with. And the Glacier Brown I really like as well. So those are the 2 that I have, and those would be my 2 recommendations from the set if you were interested in any of these. Then the last set on this swatch card is the Forest set, and I have the Forest Blue and Forest Brown. Absolutely love them. Those are definitely my favorites from this set. The Forest Green is okay, it's not bad, but I feel like it's not different enough from Forest Brown to warrant having both on your palette. So yeah, so that's that one. And then as for the Urban set, we have Urban Yellow, which I think is the nicest of these 3 yellows. So the Urban Yellow is similar to Shire Yellow in that it's a yellow and a violet pigment, but if I hold them up together you can see that the Urban Yellow is a cleaner colour. Like, it's brighter, it's not as muddy looking, it's just a nice brighter yellow. It's a slightly warmer yellow as well, and I just prefer that shade to that one, which is lucky because that's the one I have. The Urban Red is really pretty as well, and it's quite unique from the other sort of browny red colours. So it's, you know, it's got Volcano red in it. It's definitely more reddish and brownish than the Galaxy Pink. And it's different enough, I feel, from the 2 oranges, the Tundra Orange and Desert Orange. And yeah, I definitely like that one. I'm glad I have that one. Then Urban Green is also really beautiful, has some nice subtle granulation. It is fairly similar in hue to, it's a bit darker than the Forest Brown, which I have, but I probably wouldn't need both of them on my palette. It's different to the Tundra Green. I'm just trying to compare it to some of the other greens. Yeah, the Urban Green is definitely different from all the other greens. It's not similar enough to any of the others that I'd be like, you don't need both. But I'd say the one that's the most similar to is probably the Forest Brown, and I'd say you probably don't need both on a palette. It's quite easy, I would say, to modify the hue of Forest Brown to get close to Urban Green if you had both. I don't think both would be necessary in a palette. Urban Grey is a nice one. It's interesting. It's a 4 pigment mix. Compared to some of the other greys, it's quite similar to Shire Grey, I would say, hue-wise. It's not very similar to any of the others, I don't think. So it's definitely a bit different. The Glacier Black as well. Yeah, it's a bit similar to Glacier Black, but it's definitely a more unique one compared to some of the other greys. It's got a bit of a green sort of undertone to it. And then the Urban Brown has some really nice granulation. It's like a lighter color overall, but has some really interesting granulation. So compared to colors like the Glacier Brown, which is a much darker, high tinting colour. In the wash, they look fairly similar, I think. So again, I don't think you'd necessarily need both of them. But I think that's the one it's closest to. Looking at the other colours, yeah. So I think these three are probably the nicest from the set. The grey, I think, complements the set nicely in terms of, like, if you're looking at the 5 colours as a limited palette. I feel like the grey and the brown do have a place here. But I think the brown is definitely similar enough to at least Glacier Brown that I don't think you would need both of them. So if you have one, you don't need the other. And as for the Urban Grey, whilst it is different from the others, if it wasn't as part of the set, I'm not sure I would have gone out to purchase it separately, if that makes sense. But having swatched it, it's not a bad colour, and I definitely want to put it on my next palette that I'm putting together to see how it works with some of my other paints as well. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. I found 2 new colours to put onto my Jackson's wish list, as I said. The Shire Blue and Galaxy Black, which I was not expecting. It'd be interesting to see. I think Galaxy Black would be an interesting dupe, similar sort of colour to like Sodalite Genuine from Daniel Smith, which I believe is definitely more expensive than the Schmincke Galaxy Black. So it would be interesting to swatch those side by side to see how they look. You know what, actually, I'm going to do that. So just give me 2 minutes and I'll be back to show you what that looks like. Okay, well, because I was curious, I had to go ahead and do the side by side swatch. So the one on the top is the Schmincke Galaxy Black, and the one on the bottom is Daniel Smith Sodalite Genuine. And yeah, the swatches are still wet, but I feel like the Sodalite Genuine definitely seems like it has a brighter blue pigment running through it, but I feel like it's a fairly good dupe. I think if you added a bit of like a phthalo blue or a brighter blue pigment to the Galaxy Black, you'd get something very similar to Sodalite Genuine. So yeah, and the Galaxy Black looks like it granulates much more heavily than the Sodalite as well. So if you want something similar in colour to like a Sodalite but with more granulation, the Galaxy Black is a really good bet. I definitely think like it's an interesting one, that's for sure. So yeah, there we go. I highly recommend the dot card to try it out for yourself if you're looking at purchasing some of these super granulating colours. The dot card's not too expensive overall. I think it's probably less than the price of a tube of paint from one of the super granulating colours. Definitely worth getting to try it out. I know a couple of the sets aren't included, but overall I feel like it's really great to get a taste of what these colours are like. The dot cards, at least on the super granulation sets, seem to have enough paint included that you can, you know, do a couple of extra swatches as well as swatching on the paper here if you want to compare to other colours you already have to see how they sort of match up. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on this one. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know which of these are your favourite, which of these were your favourite colours of the ones that I swatched today. Do you have a favourite? And have any of these now jumped onto your Jackson's wish list or not? And anyway, I will see you guys again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.